Hey there, friends. Welcome back to the Mom to Mom Mentoring Podcast, where we're all about helping you live powerfully, lead with purpose, and love with passion, right in the middle of your beautiful, messy, everyday life. I'm Misty, your certified coach and guide for the journey. Today, we're talking about something that every mom, every woman needs, even if you don't realize it yet, a mentor. Maybe you've asked yourself, where are the mentors? Am I supposed to have one? What does mentoring even look like today? Well, today you're about to get some answers. I'm sitting down with someone who embodies what it means to lead, love, and mentor well. My dear friend, the Becky Moyer. But before we dive in, let me invite you to something that could shift everything for you. Have you ever thought, I wish someone could just help me figure out my next step? Well, I offer free clarity calls just for women like you. On this call, we'll take a look at where you're feeling stuck, where you long to grow, and what God might be calling you toward. You'll walk away with a clear vision, maybe a simple next step, and a whole lot of encouragement. Because that's what mentors do, right? So, pause this episode, scroll to the show notes, and book your free clarity call with me today. All right, now let's meet Becky. Today's guest is someone whose wisdom and warmth have blessed me deeply. Becky Moyer. Becky's a business owner, ministry leader, and a sought after speaker who knows firsthand the power of investing in others. She started her career as the first female state sales manager at Guide One Insurance. Becky was paving the way for women in leadership long before it was common. Now, for over 3 decades, Becky and her husband BJ have run Moyer and Moyer Insurance Agency. And Becky specializes in supporting churches, nonprofits, and ministries. She's raised 2 daughters while building this business. She serves as a board chair for Rehope, a ministry providing long term residential care for women and children rescued from trafficking. And she's a woman who sees people, especially those who are often overlooked. Her daughters jokingly call her Suzy Sunshine, but trust me, the joy in Becky isn't just natural, it's supernatural, it's spiritual, it's intentional. And today, we are so blessed because she is joining us to share both her heart and her hard won wisdom. Now, friend, as you listen to Becky's story, if your heart starts whispering, I need that, I want that, I want to encourage you, don't ignore it. You were never meant to figure out life alone. Just go to momtomommentoring.com/call. This is 30 minutes of me time where we'll explore where you're feeling stuck, where God might be stirring you, and how you can begin to move forward with confidence and peace. It's coaching, encouragement, and fresh perspective, all centered around you and your story. So, if you've ever wondered how to find a mentor, or maybe whether you even need one, this call is your next step. Hey, Becky, I am so glad you're here. Let's start by going back to the beginning. Can you share a moment or a season in your life that really shaped your heart for people and helped you see the power of investing in others?
I think, honestly, it probably goes back to my childhood. I was blessed to grow up in a very authentic Christian family. My dad was a pastor. My mom was heavily involved in missions. I had a sister, Sarah, who was 16 months older than I am. Her oxygen was cut off at birth. A very tragic accident with a doctor. But as a result, they didn't really expect Sarah to live. They said she would probably not live long. If she did, she would be a vegetable. And through a variety of things, my mom in prayer, very much felt the Lord say, love her for my glory. And they did. 16 months later, I'm born. People would make fun of her because of some of her awkwardness. But to God be the glory. As I began to eat, she began to eat. As I began to walk, she began to walk. And the Lord just magnified that small percentage of her brain to become this most incredible person. But kids would make fun of her. And it made me so angry. In fact, I broke a kid's arm when I was little. He called her a very cruel name. I reached out and I grabbed the back of his bike and said, "She is my sister. Do not make fun of her." And he fell into a creek and broke his arm. Now, the beauty of that is he was embarrassed to say a little girl did it. So he didn't rat me out. But I had to confess to my mom because my mom was a prayer warrior. My mom was always saying, don't behave a certain way because you're our children, but because you're the king's children. And Jesus sees everything you do, and I talk to him every day. So I knew I had to confess to my mom. And in talking to her about that, she said, Becky, people don't know what a miracle fairy is. They don't know her story. So you have to give them some love and grace because they simply don't understand. And you don't know. Maybe they're growing up in a home where everybody makes fun of people, and that's all they know. That's a critical part of my coming to know the Lord because I said, I need that heart that you have, Mama, that doesn't get angry and that forgives and loves. As it relates to my love for people, I think my mom birthed in me a desire to know people's story, to look behind how they may act on the exterior and to recognize, just like my sweet Sarah, who had such a story and was such a miracle that without knowing people's story, we really don't know why they behave the way they do and why they act the way they do. I think that's probably really where God lit that fire
Mm,
in my heart.
that's a beautiful story. It shows your tenacity and it shows how your mom nurtured passion and understanding. I see so much of you carrying both of those dynamics in your fight for the marginalized and your passion, your work through Rehope and just your love for people. And so thanks for sharing that. All the messy details. I hadn't heard that you broke somebody's arm before.
Yeah, not my proudest moment.
So, Becky, I grew up going to church, and when I became a young mom and my husband and I started taking our kids to church, this idea of mentoring was kind of new to me. I didn't know I needed what I didn't have. Then I became a single mom, and then I knew I needed help. I really didn't like what I saw in the women in the church. I didn't see authenticity or transparency in the lives of any of the women that I felt I could be safe with. I didn't know how to go about finding the mentoring I needed. What has mentoring meant for your life, and how has it played out as you have grown into who you are today?
I do think it is so important, and it frankly breaks my heart that you didn't see women that perhaps you aspired to be like in your church family. It makes me think about this past Sunday. We had a baby dedication. I always love that our pastors not only encourage the parents to respond in how they will raise this child, but they turn to the congregation and say something to the effect of, do you commit to live a life such that if this child patterns after you, that they will be living a biblically obedient life and a life that reflects your glory? And the congregation says, I will. I think we have a responsibility of the church, wherever we are, to live in faithfulness to our love for Christ, obedience, and to pursue holiness. But to God be the glory. I've had so many women I could look to and say, how did you navigate this? So, mentoring, as I look back, has really been a very important part of my life. I already mentioned the importance of my mom, but my dad lived out the love of Christ. So, I was fortunate. I had so many women that I knew were authentic. in their faith. And that's, I think, so important. And I could watch how they interacted. And fortunately, some of those women stayed home with their kids. Some of those women worked outside the home. Some of those women owned businesses. And I had all these examples of women who were obedient to what God led them to do. That was so important for me as I was growing up because the world has all sorts of opinions of what's the right way. And really, the only right way is what God leads us to do. I appreciate that I had examples of women who lived out their faith true to them and their Lord, not according to what the world said was right.
You have such a beautiful story of family and your dad, and that is, I think, more of a exception nowadays than the rule, unfortunately. Now, here's something that I find interesting, and you're probably very aware of, but especially the millennial generation, the 30s, 40 type of generation, how they have been leaving the church. They're moving a lot more. The longevity for a job for millennials is like 5 years. And so there's so much transition in their lives. And I just did a podcast series on women's friendships, and these are the trends that they're up against in finding friendships. But I would say these are the trends they're up against in even finding mentors and experiencing what you had the privilege of experiencing.
I understand what you're saying. And I really think all generations of women seek deep, authentic friendships. Sadly, I think technology and social media give this false sense of connectedness, but it's often surface level at best. And so I think many women in that generation, and I always hate stereotyping, but it's true, they aren't even really sure what that looks like unless they've been blessed with that example. True friendship takes risk. It takes time. You risk being hurt, but it's worth it. And I think I encourage young women, be willing to be vulnerable with someone who's safe. Be willing to be authentic. And I try to be that for a lot of young women because when you do that in a relationship and you commit to confidentiality, that's where the depth of relationship grows. And that's where you have the opportunity to pour sound doctrine into someone. And I think sometimes we put pressure on ourselves because we think it has to be this program or this, I need a mentor for life. And the reality is, I hope it's just a natural rhythm of who I am. It just becomes a pattern that at times I'm going to mentor someone for a moment. It may be simply a word of encouragement. It may be for a season that they're going through. And there are some women that I continue to be a part of their life and they continue to be a part of my life. As an older woman now, I continually pray, Lord, help me slow down enough to be aware if there's someone you were wanting me to connect to. But on the same hand, it's a little awkward at times, for example, to go up and say, the Lord's just had you on my heart. It just seems like you're overwhelmed. You're trying to do everything, and there's just doesn't seem to be peace in your life. So could we have coffee and talk about it? That's not the way God would have us approach it. You can just say, I just love you're a part of our church, and I'm so impressed you always get your kids to church on time. Just go to coffee. I'd love to hear your story. That's a better way to approach it.
It doesn't have to be this formal program. I have been mentored through my life, and it has been through a story or through a word of encouragement or a one-time thing. I love that you take the expectation that this is what it has to look like. What would you say the difference between friendship and mentorship is?
Well, that's very important because to a degree, a friendship is a give and take. It should be where you are there for each other, you lift each other up, you encourage each other. Initially, as a mentor, it's kind of a one-way relationship. I am there to pour into them. I feel compelled because of the biblical mandate to share sound doctrine. Young women, young moms, single women, they all have all their obstacles and challenges. They need to hear sound doctrine. They don't need my opinion. They don't need more expectations that the world gives them. And to give someone sound doctrine, you have to be willing to realize they may not like it, like you. I love to be liked, but I have to be willing in a discipleship or a mentoring relationship to take the risk that I might even offend. I don't want to offend, and I want to do it in love and grace. And I think most times they know where my heart is coming from. But I think as a mentor, you can't just tell people what they want to hear.
Mm. What would be something you would say that a woman might not want to hear? Maybe we need to hear it right now.
I often tell women, you need to shut out the noise of the world. Spend less time on Pinterest, spend less time on Facebook, if that's an issue for them. Spend more time in God's Word. Seek and develop your relationship with the Lord. If you're blessed to be in a marriage and there's not abuse, the greatest gift you can give your kids is love their daddy. It's so easy for our kids to become everything, and they are important and they need our attention, but our marriages need our attention too. And so I sometimes have to challenge women to be sure Christ is first, to focus on the priorities that are biblical priorities. And we can't be negligent in our responsibilities, but it's important that we're doing it with Christ at the center. I also at times have had to tell and encourage women, do you realize when you're constantly putting your husband down and you're constantly being critical of them, that there are other women who long to have a husband or a widow in our church who misses her husband? The same is, don't constantly be complaining about your kids. Don't constantly be complaining about how busy your life is and how you can't do anything you want to do, because there are women who long to have children and
Mm.
can't. And also, some of that busyness is on you. You've made choices that have created the busyness of life that you're in. We don't take responsibility often for what we can do to make our life more in balance and better. And sometimes we just need somebody to remind us.
To the mom who is listening to Becky right now, she just reminded you to take ownership over your own schedule and quit blaming everything else. You said it a lot nicer than I do.
And I say it in love, as
Yeah,
we
I
say it
know,
in
right?
love.
I was thinking we were going through First Samuel in church, and it was First Samuel 15 where Saul is waiting on Samuel because they're gonna go into battle, and Samuel's a little bit late, right? And so Saul does the sacrifice himself. Samuel comes and says, What have you done?" He had all the excuses in the world, right? He was afraid of the people. Those were all true things. And he used them as his excuse when Samuel questioned, "Why have you not obeyed God?" So usually our excuses, they're true, right? But we got to take ownership for the fact that more than likely we got our own selves into this mess. And by the grace of God, by his wisdom, by his mercy, can find our way through it. And Becky, I think you would 500,000,000% agree with me. It is not easy. It is hard.
I know. And that's, I think, why I have such
Yeah.
a heart for women that I meet is it is hard. I'm saying every time I am faithful to really seek
Mm,
the Lord in, would you have me take on this additional thing? Or would you have me perhaps step away from something when I fulfill the level of my commitment? And the Lord is just so faithful to give clarity of, yes, this is where I want you serving. This is not where I want you serving. I find a lot of young women struggle with, I just don't know what God's will is. Well, part of that, frankly, is they're not spending time in his word because a lot of his words are really clear. There are a lot of things he's pretty clear about what his will is. Now, there are other nuances he's not, but I don't want it to sound as though I think it just simplify your schedule. It's
Yeah, and it's stuff I learned. I was raising 4, on my own, and I was in full-time ministry,
right.
and I would get sucked into that all the time because I was doing good things, Becky. It
Oh,
was
yeah.
for the kingdom. I was doing beautiful things and ministering. I was teaching kids how to study the word of God, how to pray, how to love Jesus. Oh my gosh, so much fun. And then, like, my family would crash and burn, and I'd be like, "Oh crap, I've done it again. I've gotten caught up in the swirl of even good things." And I would just have to put the brakes on. And fortunately, I had a leader that valued family.
Yes.
And so there were a couple times where I was just like, "Hey, I gotta go for a week. My family is crashing, has crashed, and I need to regroup and reevaluate and reassess." And so I could, like, pull away for a week and just, hunker down again, and that was a blessing for me, but boy, I missed it all the time, and God was so kind and so gracious, and, so I don't say that as a, "You need to do this." I say that as a, "Oh my gosh, I have learned."
I love your bravery and your honesty to be able to go to your boss and say, I need to refocus for a period of time. And as a business owner and a boss of many, and when I was the state sales director, I was always encouraging you only can perform as well in your job as you're healthy spiritually, physically, and emotionally yourself. So I loved and encouraged that transparency because I would rather you be honest. And I would say, take a week, get that in order, focus on that. Because when you come back, you're going to be stronger and more committed. And so I admire your bravery. Something else you said made me think is, if we look to our world, they're not a very gracious world. And so not only do we need to extend more grace, we need to extend grace to ourselves.
Mm.
Anytime I realize, whoa, I've kind of gotten overcome or whatever, the first thing is to stop and pray, but also I know the Lord wants to give myself grace. That was the past. What do I learn from that? But how do we move forward? I don't think our Lord wants us to stay stuck. Just as He gives us grace, we need to give ourselves grace.
Absolutely. You talked about our need for transparency and authenticity and how we, as the mentors, create that space. You said that you're willing to lead the way by being authentic, by being transparent. But what else? What other qualities should someone look for when they're praying about and looking at the women around them for a mentor?
Look for a woman who you've seen perhaps go through a difficult journey, but she's done it with grace and peace. That's why I've been very open about my cancer journey, for example, and how the Lord held me close. And so when you see women that walk through things like that and they do it with a faith and a peace, then it's very easy. If there is a list in Titus 2 of the things that an older woman should be passing on. And so I think that's a pretty good list of things to look for. Are they someone who doesn't gossip, isn't malicious, who loves their husband if they're married, who is faithful to the Lord? And so look for some of those qualities.
Well, Jesus puts it in there for us. Like you said, so much of our I don't know is really answered in the word.
I would say, I think a lot of women, even younger women, it's not a lack of commitment, but it's a lack of confidence. And that it's easy for us to say, I don't want to be that vulnerable to reach out to someone, or I don't want to reach out to someone because I don't have all the answers. Really, at its core, I believe mentorship is giving encouragement, the power of presence and acceptance, and encouraging forgiveness. It's things that every woman can do. We make it far more complicated than it needs to be. It's really just a willingness to invest in other women and to allow other women to invest in you. Let me tell you, as a woman who's now in her mid to late 60s, who's lived a lot of life, you have no idea the hurt that the woman sitting next to you in the pew is enduring. It's really only when we're willing to be faithful to the Lord and be willing to invest in people that we can learn where we might be able to meet them and provide some encouragement to them.
Okay, but Becky, being a mentor can be a little intimidating. What if I give the wrong counsel? What if I'm not in the word enough? It puts a lot of ownership on me to continue to be sharp and sharpened by the word. What about the woman who's struggling with confidence to reach out, to give a hand up to a younger mom?
It's not on me to cure things. It's not on me to fix things. I'm simply there to give care, and where I can direct people to scripture to give sound doctrine and give scriptural reference, but then they have to take that, and it's really between them and the Lord. I know early on when I was younger and would mentor, I think I sometimes would get frustrated of, I mean, it's so clear. If you would just do this, things would be better. It's so much easier to see from the outside at times. And sometimes we're wrong because we don't have all the facts. But just that freedom of realizing when I invest in people, I'm just an instrument in the Redeemer's hands. I'm simply a vessel, a conduit of his love, his grace, and it's really up to him. He gets the glory. It's not about me.
Okay, one thing I've learned in my journey with Jesus is that when I just make myself available, he comes. So often, when I've sat before a room of women facilitating a workshop or speaking, or even just one on one with a woman, I am flabbergasted again and again that he comes. One time I was standing before 35 women, guiding them through some interactions with Jesus, and he was just speaking to them. I just wept. I said, Jesus, thank you for always coming. I just love how you love these women. And I had this sense of a response from him. Misty, thanks for always setting the table and making a place for me at the table to come. That's all it is. We just make space for him to come. That's one thing I've loved about aging is the relief that it's not about me. It's about the Lord. Now, in my search for mentors, God did provide in amazing ways. I did find a mentor, but she lived like 2 hours away. She was just a woman of grace and kindness and somebody I wanted to be like. I would pack my kids up in the van, my 2 younger ones, and we would go once a month and I would clean her house so that I could just be around her and spend time with her. My question is, how do we set expectations for mentoring relationships?
I think that's a great question because I think it is going to vary. But I love how I've heard young people talk about their define the relationship, like when they're dating. Well, I think that's true in mentoring. We need to define the relationship. For example, I had a young woman reach out to me one time who had started a business and she knew I was a business owner. She was just feeling overwhelmed. She still had children at home. She reached out and said, I could really use your help. I realized in trying to get clarity, she was strong in her faith. She really needed some understanding of how I had handled things from a time management perspective. I do seminars on balancing life's priorities and perspective. What if we just meet once a week for a month and I'm going to just do a one on one training and presentation of that with you? And she goes, that's what I need. I just gave her my outline and I gave her an assignment. That was her specific need. Someone else was new to their faith and they were on fire. We actually found a book and I said, if you'll commit to doing the reading, then we met once a week. We took a chapter a week and just went through doctrinal matters, spiritual disciplines, and that relationship went a long time. We're not meeting on an ongoing basis anymore, but we still have connection points. Sometimes someone's going through a really difficult thing and they just need somebody to pray with them. It is fair, it is wise to define that.
What do you say to a young mom who says, "Oh, I can't ask her, she's so busy."
I say, do you know what a blessing it would be to her for you to approach her and say, I see in you someone that I would love to learn from. Do you have any time or capacity to spend some time with me? And my mom, who was one of the most godly women I knew, as she aged, she struggled with feeling a lack of purpose and usefulness. She had things to share and began to pour into others' lives. And I saw how she flourished to be able to pour into other people, really gave her new purpose, new life. So don't rob an older woman of that joy and that opportunity. And what's the worst thing that can happen? She could say, I really can't right now. And you have to be okay with that. But I don't honestly know any woman who's going to say that. They're going to at least be willing to have an initial time of meeting and encouragement. One thing you said that I love is sometimes mentoring is just doing life with someone.
Mhm.
And that's what you were doing. And so maybe you're thinking, people may be going, well, I really don't have time, but invite someone into your home to cook with you. Sometimes people learn by just observing you in your environment. Frankly, there are women today who can't go to coffee every week because it's not in their budget. Be willing to invite people into your home. It would be encouraging for some young women to see that it's not always meticulous. Every mentoring relationship looks different,
Yeah.
and we need to be okay with that.
It depends on my season. When we lived in Kentucky, and it was that season where I had 2 girls, 11 and 12, and I thought, I don't want them to grow up and say, "There are no mentors." I believe firmly that we reap what we sow. I wanted to start sowing so my girls would reap. I was 35 and I started mentoring 4 college girls. We just invited them to dinner. They ate with us, they cooked with us, they even lived with us for different seasons. And what was super fun, Becky, is 2 of those college girls ended up mentoring my girls. But now I'm in a different season, right? And movement has been really important to me. So I have been telling women if they want to connect, hey, come and walk with me from 7:30 to 9 in the morning, inviting them into a place where I do have time and space.
Invite them into the rhythm of your life. And that's a good point is the old saying is more is caught than taught.
There's always somebody a few steps behind us that is looking and longing. So, Becky, as we wrap up today, I love to close all of my podcasts with one thing because most of our listeners are busy moms who are trying to do all the things. And it's hard to remember, oh, what is that nugget? So, we have covered a lot of wonderful ground today in our conversation, but bring us back to simplicity. You're having coffee with that mom. You've shared your heart. You're getting ready to part ways. What is that one thing you want her to walk away with that she holds in her heart?
I think recently I did a study on the spiritual disciplines, and the thing through all of the great information that came out was live simply to live ready. And I would just encourage women where you can simplify your life. simplify your life so you can be ready for whatever God has for you. And part of that, I would encourage you to realize your life has great value. Wherever you are on the timeline of life, you have life experiences, you have faith markers in your testimony of things you have gone through. So be willing to pour your life into the fabric of other women. Be willing to allow other women to pour their life into the fabric of your life because it's worth it.
Becky, thank you so much for sharing your story, your wisdom, and your heart with us today. And to you listening, I hope you feel encouraged, seen, and maybe even challenged in the best possible way. If today's conversation stirred your heart, please don't leave that longing unspoken. Book your free clarity call. Together, we'll get you clear on what God is calling you to next and how you can take a next step with joy and confidence. Now, if you've ever wondered, where are the mentors? How do I even begin to find one? Do I really need a mentor, or could I be one? Then you're going to want to tune in next week, because we're going to talk about all these questions and more. It's a conversation you don't want to miss. Before you go, if this episode blessed you, would you take a moment and leave a 5-star review? Every review helps other women find the encouragement and hope they're longing for. And friend, as always, remember, when you shine, you give others permission to shine too.